All right. What's going on? How's everybody feeling? Everybody's cool. Everything's all right. Um, you know what I need to do? I need to plug up these batteries while I get ready for this next shoot. So yes, just really quick, I want to see who's all here. Who was not in class in person? Is there anybody on the session right now who was not in the last class in person? Who
I
missed
wasn't
last week?
there.
Okay, got it. And are you in our beginner or our intermediate class?
Beginner.
Fire. Okay, cool beans. So, what we talked about mainly, let me just go through here because I'm gonna pull up the slideshow as well, and then we're gonna kind of run through that really quick, and then we're gonna get right into our feedback sessions. So, for those who don't need the refresher, who knows what's going on, you're just here for the vibes. You can start getting together those feedback shots that you want to submit into, for us to have conversations about. If you already submitted some feedback stuff and you want me to talk about what's already up in the channel, um, just let me know what that is. You can just either repost that into this text chat, or you can, send it to me directly, whatever is clever. But this will be the time for those who want to participate in the feedback session to start getting your stuff organized, uploading it, so that we can get right to that. So let me pull up our slideshow from last week. And we had, listen, I'm not gonna lie. Of all the, I don't know what it was, and correct me if I'm wrong. But last week, I felt really good about everything. Like I really had a good time with the conversations. The questions were great, and then I felt really good about the slides as well, man. It just was a really good it was a really good session for both classes, to be honest. Um, why can't hear? Who else can hear me? People can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think you maybe try changing your audio preferences in settings. Oh man. Yep. I wanna see if we can get them working. But so yeah, honestly, so the main meat and potatoes of what we talked about last class for our intro was just kind of the overview of what. Oh damn! Did I put on the timer? That's crazy. All right, you guys can see this, right? You can see the slideshow. Let me make this. Let me focus this. You guys can see that. Anyone having trouble
Yeah.
seeing? Okay, cool. Thank you. As long as I got one person designated to let me know that I can be heard, that's perfect. Is it? And it's not backwards, right? Yes, it should be good for you all, right?
It looks good.
Cool beans. So what we talked about was just the overall concept, and we talked about this a little bit in person, and I honestly can't stress this enough because it's not only one of the most revolutionary concepts for me as a photographer, but I think it's kind of like the basis of understanding your approach as well as that hierarchy of like importance when you're learning different things, right? Like you can lock into the technical skill, like absolutely, right? Learn your camera, techniques, lighting, editing, sure. But the main understanding that I'll always reiterate is that light is your only subject matter. So developing a relationship with light, be that studio lighting that you're able to control and manipulate to get the desired outcome that you want, or being able to dissect the scene like in real time, come into a new space and you can say, this is my good light, this is my bad light, this is light I can work with, this is light I can't work with. And the more comfortable you get with understanding that and just being able to utilize light in the way that you see fit, that will give you the legs that you need to just shoot any situation, to be honest. Because no matter what that subject matter is, light is the only thing that exists. Nothing, you can't see anything without light. And if you can figure that one out, that's going to be solid for the most part. So we kind of just talked about what it means not only to have that develop the relationship with light, and then how to develop that relationship, right? So overall arching concept, every photo that you see is made up of two visual elements that need to be in sync. You need compositional harmony, and you need exposure. And that relationship is what gives you a visible image, right? Composition, and we talked about this, it's all of the visual elements within your frame, within that square that you can see. And essentially the relationship between those visual elements. That's background, foreground, and everything else in between. And that's just how the relationship of all your different subject matters, what you choose to leave in, what you choose to leave out. Exposure is the essentially that's the amount of light that reaches the sensor or camera. That's the stuffy term. The actual grounded term is that exposure is the amount of your photo that is visible, right? Um, Not necessarily brightness, but it can be darkness, right? You can intentionally choose to underexpose to give like a more dramatic or moody or somber type of feeling. It's all okay, you know. And there's a spectrum when it comes to like competent, successful exposure, and it's just understanding how to get those results is what makes up, you know, a harmonious photo. So exposure is made up of three main tenets, right? You have your shutter speed, you have your aperture, you have your ISO. Shutter speed is essentially that's the speed at which your camera or your device is able to take those photos, right? So you have your sensor, and every time you hear a click, that is the shutter removing itself out of the way of the sensor, and it's giving you like it's giving the light an ability to come and smack the sensor, and that's what makes the photo. And so shutter speed is the speed at which that shutter opens and closes. The analogy that I like is that if you have a cup and you turn on your faucet and you hose the cup under the faucet for 6 seconds, you'll probably get a considerable amount of water, right? As opposed to if you just like throw it under and you pull it back really quick, you're gonna get much less water. Same principle when it comes to light, right? The faster your shutter speed, the less light is being taken in, right? My camera is blocking the bottom line. My apologies. We'll move that guy. You know what? Fuck it. Get him out of here. He's not even that cute anyway. Um, So yeah, so essentially in the same principle, right? The faster your shutter speed, the shorter amount of time that your cup is going underneath that faucet, right? So as a result, you're going to get less light. Faster shutter speed, darker photo. Slower shutter speed, brighter photo, right? And the decision to choose a faster and slower shutter speed varies greatly depending on certain amounts, certain types of subject matter, right? And we'll get into that. And this is just a quick example of the effect of a shutter speed in regards to the sharpness of that photo. Um, and as you can see, you know, shutter speed is measured in a fraction, but it's not math, not for real. Um, 1/500th of a second, you know, you have a very quick. That's going to be, you know, sports, and then anything higher than 1/500th of a second, that's going to be like birds in flight. You're shooting cars driving by, like really, really fast moving things. Um, everything between 250 and 500, that's going to be your sports, people running. You know, you can get away with 125, but it's going to be a little fuzzy, to be honest. If you got like really high moving sports, that's going to be tough. If you got like kids, 125 could be fine. If they're like little toddlers running around, 160 to like 130, that's going to be your portrait range, right? Because you're shooting subject matter that isn't moving. They're sitting down, they're stationary, and you can comfortably use a very slow shutter speed to capture someone that isn't moving. And the reason for that will be it will give you an ability to balance the light that you get from your shutter speed, and then also you can bring the settings down on your other, you know, parts of exposure to make sure you compensate for the brightness, right? So if you're shooting in a place and you want it to be really, really bright, um, but you don't want to have your ISO really, really high, you can bring your shutter speed low instead and bring up the brightness, and your subject matter is not moving, so you don't have to worry about too much blurriness in the subject matter. Um, and then you have your 1.8, I mean your 1/8, 1/4, 1 second. These are extremely slow. Sheesh. These are extremely slow shutter speeds. Say that 5 times fast. And there's some very cool artistic reasons for using slow shutters like this. Part of the reason why we're putting together this photo walk is to do something specifically geared to this slow shutter speed. And we're actually going to show a couple examples of different shutter speeds and their application, right? So this is a shoot I did, and I intentionally wanted to have a slower shutter speed just to help illustrate the movement. And that's one of the bigger utilizations of a slower shutter is to give that visual illustration of movement in a 2D image, right? Because it's kind of difficult, right, to show something moving and show that it is moving when you're freezing a moment. And sometimes you want that really crispy, immediate like freeze action, and that can be cool. But sometimes it can make your images kind of flat. And not saying it's a bad thing, but when it comes to my particular work, I love to have things that have a bit more, body and personality. And even if I'll sacrifice a bit of visibility if it gives a cool effect. And you can see here as an example, I was freehanding it. So, the shutter speed was slow enough to capture her movement in a really cool, blurry way. And the background was moderately sharp. On this image, you can see that the grass as compared to this photo is way blurrier because just small motion in my hands can create shake. So if I'm not completely still, then capturing a sharp image will be a lot more difficult at a slower shutter speed. But it worked because her face was moderately in focus, and that was really what was more important. But it created a cool effect, and this was at 1/4 of a second, right? Here's another example. This is a higher shutter speed, right? So this is another shoot I did. I was shooting breakdancers. Um, so this will be a certain situation where a higher shutter speed will benefit you because their types of movement, you sometimes you want to capture that freeze motion, or you want to capture a really cool thing, and you want to make sure it's sharp all the way through. Certain elements can be really cool if there's an added blur. But for this shot, I really wanted to go for just a freeze frame, and 1/500th of a second is what got that. We're gonna go through a couple more examples just to give you an idea of like how the ranges complement certain subject matter, right? So natural light, freezing action. You can see I'm even getting down. I'm getting like the gravel individual grains, like very very quick shutter speed. That's 1/1600th of a second. Skater, I used the flash here, so that definitely helped with capturing the motion. But 1/500th of a second, right? And just to we don't have to go too deep into it, but utilizing a flash can help you capture motion, especially in low light. That also will require a significantly less or slower shutter speed, right? So this at 500th, 1/800th of a second, you know, I can still get a shot just as crispy, essentially, with a slower shutter speed as long as I have an extra flash. So, that's something to kind of mess around with and play with when it comes to the subject matter that you're looking for. But, 1/1600th, 1/500th, 1/800th, right? And this is an example of a extremely long shutter speed, right? This one was probably open. This is not my shot, but I've done this shot before, and I can tell you, and you can tell really just by the distance of this, like the light. This was probably closer to about 20 to 30 seconds open shutter, right? Um, are we good? Does anyone need some help with audio still? Because I do hear some people kind of coming and going. If someone has some issues with audio still, just maybe reach out to somebody. We can probably get you working out. But yeah, this is a really long shutter, and the reason why this shot looks like this, right, and it's so cool, and you don't have all this extra like blurriness like in the shot previously, right? Like with this shot, long shutter. It's not even that long. This was probably 1/4 of a second, but the background's really blurry. For this one to get a background, forget a shot like this with a long shutter and the background's crispy like that. That's utilized by having a tripod. So as long as your camera's sitting somewhere still and you're shooting and you leave the shutter open for a really long time, that motion, especially in non-moving objects, will cause blur. But if you leave it somewhere still and it's stationary, no blur whatsoever. So it's a really cool illusion, really cool effect that you can utilize because all of the moving elements will give you motion, and specifically the moving and high bright elements will give you that motion because as you can see, the light is present, but the dark colors are not present because the dark colors are not reflecting back. They're not affecting the sensor as dramatically as the light, right? Cool stuff, very scientific. Another cool example, shooting a waterfall, any type of moving water will give you a really cool cotton candy effect. This is between 10 and 20 seconds, right? And so you have aperture. That's the second of that holy trinity of exposure. Aperture essentially refers to the amount of light that is let into your camera. So shutter speed is this thing. Boom. That's the shutter moving out of the way. So now when you think about your lens, there's a hole, right? And so the contraction and the expanding of that hole is essentially controlled by your aperture, right? And as you can see in here, these little blades, every camera lens has these blades, and they are representative of aperture. Um, the wider your opening, the more light, but the lower the number. It is a little confusing, but the more light, the wider the opening and the lower the number. So if you say I have a really open aperture, that means you have a really, really low number. That means you're letting in a lot of light. And if a photographer says I have a really, really small aperture, like closed aperture, that means you have a really, really high number and a very small amount of light coming in. So that's something you're just gonna have to get used to. It's, funky little photographer jargon, but and sometimes you'll hear, sometimes you'll hear photographers be like, yeah, my aperture is mad low. And they're referring to the number, but sometimes they can say I have a really, closed aperture and they're talking about the blades, right? But essentially, the lower the number, the brighter the image, and then the higher the number, the darker the image. And then also what's really important about aperture is that it controls it controls your depth of field, right? And what depth of field is, that's the amount of your subject matter that is in focus. So have you ever seen those photos where you have like a portrait and the background is really blurry and the person is really sharp? That's because they have a really shallow depth of field and they're able to blur that background by having a shorter aperture, a smaller aperture. That's how you get that. That's how you get that really blurry background, right? You're gonna use a smaller aperture number. What is this? Get this. What the heck is going on here? Yeah. So a really small aperture that's 2.8 and lower. That's where you're gonna get a really blurry background and to give you that nice, portrait background blur look. And for when you're shooting like landscapes and you want to make sure the foreground, even for this as an example, right? So that the way that you can see like the sharpness in the bushes here is almost as equally as sharp as this mountain that's way, way far away. That's because their aperture is really, really high, right? That means they have a really high number and they're able to get a wider range of focus between their subject matter, foreground, and background. So low aperture, a lot of light, less focus in the whole composition. Higher aperture, um, way less light, and a lot more focused within your foreground and background within your composition. So, and all these things are going to and fret not because it's going to take time and it's going to give you it's going to just take time. Trust me, because aperture is one of those concepts that was the most elusive to me during my journey. And it wasn't until that was like low key of the main fundamentals of photography. Aperture was the last thing that I really understood, and once that clicked, I was just kind of like, oh, like things started kind of clicking a lot more, and I was able to honestly get way more creative, right? Because the photo itself doesn't necessitate the creativity always. It's the combination of the what you incorporate in the frame, what you choose to leave out of the frame, where do you choose to sit your subject matter, and then also sometimes being able to blur that background can be just the deciding factor in whether or not a photo looks high quality and creative versus something that might look a little not low quality, but just not as intentional. So that small decision on aperture and controlling your depth of field can be a really strong decider in just the impact of that photo, right? So yeah, we just talked about depth of field. Another example, for this shot, I used a higher aperture of f8. I knew I had the subject matter here, wanted to make sure the background and the capital was seen. There's a lot of visual elements a part of this story in the foreground and the background that I need to incorporate. So a higher aperture was going to accomplish that. And then in the same place, same event, I wanted to bring my aperture down lower to about 2.2 because I wanted to give this look of the foreground, the people I'm shooting past. I want them to be slightly less focused than the subject matter, because what that does is it creates clear separation between who I'm shooting and who I want you to focus on versus the background, which is not important, and the people who he's talking to, which are minorly important, right? So if you look at the visual hierarchy, right, you can clearly tell that this is the most important thing to look at. This is like the secondary important thing to look at, and then this background is the least important thing to look at. And as you can tell, the difference is really that's illustrated from the amount of focus of those three different things within that visual hierarchy. That's really what these techniques are for. These techniques are for you to implement them not as rules to create a good photo, but based on what you want as a desired result, and based on you know the the visual emphasis or the hierarchy you want to illustrate within your work. You utilize these tools to create that, right? Like, it's I want you to look at this. How can I make sure that the people who are visually like engaging with my work, how can I be sure that they look at what I want them to look at, or you know convey any type of concept? That's what these tools are for. I don't like to refer them as rules of photography. They're just tools of photography, right? um but yeah, so higher aperture or lower aperture as opposed to a higher aperture, depending on my desired intent, right? Another example, I went with a lot way lower aperture, f1.8, because I wanted to create a really, wet, shallow depth of field, just to make sure that, the only thing that was most important was the thing that was most visible. But I didn't want to completely exclude anything because they all kind of told that story. But just another example of like a lower aperture and what that would be used for, right? And sometimes we see this, especially with amateur photographers, right? I'm sure you all got cousins and little sisters and brothers or whoever who just graduated or going to graduate, and you're like, man, I want to get this shot, and it's like, man, but it didn't work out, and that possibly could be a result of the aperture. So take that into consideration. Just a little chart, really quick. I'm uploading these slides so that you'll have access to these charts and whatnot. So just a quick chart. You don't have to really digest or ingest everything, but just to give you an idea, just to kind of really further drive that point. Higher aperture, f22 is crazy high. Very, very small aperture, right? So it's a high aperture, but when they say small, you remember what they're referring to is the hole, the opening, right? So it's a high aperture number, but the actual aperture ring, right? Aperture refers to a specific piece in your lens, right? It's called the aperture ring. That's those little blades, the little 007 shit, right? The blades, the when they say small, that means the opening is very small, though the number is high. Um, it lets in half as much light, right? Huge depth of field. That means the amount of the range of focus in the photo is going to be very, very wide. 1.4, very large aperture. So that means the opening is very really large, like it's hugely dilated. Um, lets in a huge amount of light, super thin depth of field. So if the f22 means a lot of the shot is going to be in focus, that means if the depth of field is very thin, that means the range of focus with that photo is going to be very, very small, right? And then everything else is just different varying levels of that. Bet. And then ISO. We don't have to go
Can
super
you
deep into this. Yes, question?
can you go back to the definition of aperture real quick,
Absolutely.
please?
Absolutely. So aperture, that is the amount of light that is allowed to enter your camera. And you can use that as an example, as an analogy. You can use like the pupil of your eye, right? The way it opens and dilates based on how much light it's trying to let in. And a great way to use as a visual representation is that this is an aperture ring. This mechanism, right? These blades, this is what actually happens in your camera. And this was actually in your camera lens right now, right? Every lens has a different types of aperture functionality, but it all does the same thing. And so the lower the number, right? 2.8, your aperture ring is going to be a lot wider than an f11. So a wider aperture lets in a larger amount of light, while a smaller aperture lets in a lower amount of light. And that's going to be what controls that depth of field. Did you hear the portion where we talked about the focus and the depth of field?
Yes, I think so.
Cool beans, cool beans. And we're also going to be uploading this. I'm recording this session. I'm going to upload this whole session. That way, for folks who need to come back and re-reference it, that will be there. And then I will upload the slides individually, not individually, but the whole slideshow, so you can take the individual slides as needed. But yeah, this is going to be really huge for you controlling your depth of field, which is going to be, what helps you make that distinguishment between foreground, background, and the focus between those things, right? Just like this, right? You have a 1.8 depth of field, a lot of background blur, f8 aperture. You have a less background blur. So higher aperture, right? You can see up here, higher aperture, more of the photo is going to be in focus. Lower aperture, less of the photo is going to be in focus. It's a good rule of thumb. And so back to ISO, that's always going to be your visual representation. That's going to be the visual representation of like your camera's ability to essentially react to the light that's around you. And there's a really stuffy technical term for it, but to be real, it's just internal brightness, right? It's just internal brightness. It doesn't adjust how much light comes into your camera. It just adjusts how much of your camera's able to interpret the light, right? So if it's very, very dark and you bring your ISO up, it's essentially bringing up that brightness. But the downside of that sometimes is that depending on your camera, your higher ISOs might create a large degree of grain, noise, and like lower quality messiness that you really want to avoid. So bringing up your ISO to increase the brightness in your camera cannot be the most advantageous thing to do. It's kind of like one of the last things you want to do when it comes to taking certain photos. We'll be able to kind of like talk a little bit more deeper into that. I'll make a video specifically for that. The applications of ISO, because we in class we talked heavily about you know some of that ISO and why we should not go high or why we should or when we should, and we'll kind of talk deeper in that a little bit later. But just think of that as like your camera's internal brightness that you use to kind of like balance the light reaction. But that makes up your three main components of exposure. That's going to be your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. And balancing all three of these is going to create an exposed photo. And depending on your subject matter, that's really going to help determine what types of settings are going to best reflect what you want to get. Right. So, for example, you're shooting sports, you want a higher shutter speed. Higher shutter speed is what? They create a darker image. So that might mean you need to bring your aperture and widen it so that it lets in more light, creates a brighter image, but it can increase the depth of field. So maybe you don't want that. So instead, you might need to bring up your ISO. And that's just a quick example of like that relationship between all three of those components when taking a photo or shooting any particular circumstance, right? We don't have time to go deep into how to balance all of that, but we'll make some time for that at a different time. Okay. Here's an example of some high ISO images and the effect that it creates. Though it's cool, the lighting was very dim in this space, and it's a very dark, moody area. So it definitely often requires me to use a higher ISO. And as you can see, as a result, it creates a lot of this grain, noise, and for some people, it can be a really cool effect. Especially if you like a more older film damage type of look, that can be cool. But just know that what you're sacrificing a lot of times. A lot of times you're sacrificing the quality, you're sacrificing the visibility, and sometimes you're sacrificing, the actual harmony of the image itself. Because in a lot of ways, if your ISO is way too high, it will minimize your ability to like edit and get the brightness or the really cool details out of the colors. But you season to taste. Sometimes it's a good enough sacrifice, right? Another example, very, very high ISO, um, extreme amount of grain, noise, and you know, low quality image technically, but the moment was cool. My shutter speed was quick enough to get the shot. It had a nice enough aperture to where the background wasn't too chaotic and distracting from what I was trying to capture, and it was just a really cool moment. So that's just an example of like how you want to make sure you have a decent ISO. You want to make sure your quality's there. But if you capture a nice moment, a cool image that is reflective of something it invokes emotion above all else, that's what's going to be more important, right? Because the success of an image is less to do with the technical, specs of it, and more to do with like the emotion and how much people connect with it, right? Because if I didn't tell you this was 10,000 ISO, you wouldn't have known. You would have known, and that's true for most people's work, right? Um, so yeah, yeah. Any quick questions or concerns at all? I know, for some folks, you may have missed some things. I will be uploading this video, this specific class, so that people can go back and review some of the concepts again. Um, and then also we're going to put together a small breakout class. And honestly, we might do that Sunday evening or something like that. Um, yeah, because there are a couple people who missed first class or second class and wants to get caught up in certain ways. So I'll make sure there either be stuff in the Discord you can interact with, or we'll put together a small breakout group for folks to get engaged with that. Send me a message if that appeals to you after we're finished here. But if we don't have any questions, I want to get right into our feedback session. Is that cool? Capiche? Yeah, capiche. All right. So let's see what we got up in here. So I see we got Soul, got some stuff. Jazz, Wade, Amber. Are these people? Are these stuff we want to talk about? Cause I think Soul just put that in. That's 9:45, 9:44, 9:28, 9:20. So these are all things we want to talk about in class. Yes. I just want to double check. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Wade and Amber,
A
you got.
little bit. So for mine, I've already edited them, so I kind of just want to get like a little feedback on what I did.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, feel free to tell me specifically what you want me to do. Right? Tell me what you want me to do when we pull up these images. I would love to do that and talk through that. So let me go ahead and download these so that we can pull them up in our handy dandy, viewer thingamabopper. And just let me know, Wade, if you're cool with if you wanted us to talk through, pull up your images and talk about them. I see you put them in, but I just want to make sure I got your consent.
Yeah, it's just one image, and my question's a part of it.
Cool beans. Yep, we'll do that. Let me just give me 1 second, y'all. I'm just downloading everything. I'm uploading it to the dark web. Tapping into the mainframe. Dude, I remember back in the early 2000s, dude, they made hacking seem so cool. Like programmers, it's like, oh, you're on the computer, you're a computer dude, and they had this really dope drum and bass music, like boom, boom, chirp, 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 chirp. And then you get older and you're just like, man, that shit is boring. It is not cool as they thought it was. Or it's not as cool as they told us. All right, bet. So let's pull up these images. Bada bing, bada bing. Fire. All right. Cool. Man, get this. Man, if you don't get up out of here. All right, bet. So this is you, Amber, right?
That's me.
Wonderful. I mean, dude, very unique, creative, interesting shot. Hold on, let me bring my boy back. Let me bring my boy back in here. Yeah. All right, bet. But no, I love this shot, honestly. It's very unique, very creative, very inspired. I love a good lasagna, right? And one thing that's always going to for me create a really cool perspective is when you have just really staunch noodle, not blue, yuck. Is when you have really like just really strong lines, right? Like you got boom. And they're leading lines, right? Even though they don't necessarily point to a specific thing, it brings your eyes from all the way through the image, right? You got your lines bringing you straight through here, and this little bridge right here is that's my favorite little piece, my favorite little piece because it adds so much character, and it's almost conceptual to an extent, right? You have these two really grand, large things, man, and this very small region and area of connection between them both. It's very good image, man. I love this so much. Great patterns, great repetition. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of symmetry, a lot of symmetrical value in this image, right? You have symmetrical value going straight down the middle, as well as you got some symmetrical value right down this middle as well. And putting something so unique and eye grabbing like this right here on this third line, right? Because remember we talked about the rule of thirds. Putting it on that third line is just a cool way to do that. Very, very cool way to do that. You did your thing. This is fire. I like this a lot. The only thing, and say again.
I didn't say thank you.
Of course, you know. And listen, fantastic. And never forget, we always talk about post processing. You got your image. Whenever you get a cool image like that, you're not done necessarily because there's always a little bit we can do to help refocus the image. Whether we do that with the intentionality and the mindfulness of taking the photo or somewhere a little bit earlier. I mean, so a little bit later, right? So for me, something I would do because the things that kind of stand out, right? As a pro photographer, right? Because obviously for you guys, especially as a beginner, this is very, very strong work, right? But when you're looking at the difference between pro work and even intermediate work and a little bit more beginner work is that you'll see areas like this, right? You'll see little parts where you have like a thing that doesn't necessarily cater to the focus of the image and essentially can add to a little bit of distraction, right? So you got this is a little distracting, and then you have this area right here, right? Funny enough, it's less the highlights and really, really dark areas can draw your attention away. And so essentially the best thing that you can do when you're putting together an image or composing either in the moment or doing a bit of post processing at the end is you want to look at it and you want to say what's important, what's not important, what's driving the focus, and what is distracting. And so when you look at an image like this, it's like, okay, we got these two corners. I don't think you lose too much by coming in right here. And then honestly, we don't want to cut off too much of this area. So we'll let this rock. This is okay. We're okay with that. And we honestly can bring this in and we'll cheat it a little bit more here instead. I'm not a fan of this little thing, but it's much better than this thing and this thing at the bottom. So if we come in here and let's just see this first, right? Because we still have your thing up here on this third line. With that, let's see how it looks. Save the copy, whatever. Right? To me, it just helps the perspective a bit more, right? It helps me keeps me focused, just a little bit more focused, a little bit more less distracting, and I'm just literally I feel more in the photo now. Like I'm right here with it, right? This I don't like it, but it can't be helped, and it's not as bad. It's not as bad, but it works. It's fantastic, and even feel free to get really funky, right? Like completely play with it. Like sometimes I might even do something like throw this right here, right? Way at the top. Just see what that looks like. Let's see. Jeez, sure, whatever. Right? Yeah, kind of, sort of, whatever, But the thing about it is like you want to play, you want to get experimental, and you want to just mess around and see what sticks, right? But great image all around, great work, great work. I mean, no notes here. Love this. Great perspective. And that's what I love, especially when it comes to architectural photography, is that it can get really stale. It can get really boring. And so nowadays, if you're going to shoot buildings, get funky with it. Get wild, especially if something calls to you and there's a specific part of it, try your best to really focus in on that. And I think you did a really good job of that. The incorporation of these windows like this, great use of pattern work. The side profile of these, like, I don't even know. I guess it's these stone busts of these lions or whatever. Yeah, like I love the little ridges and the texture here. Just really, really good image. As always, a quick little crop can do you well. And honestly, not even a crop. I would just get a little, you know, little rotation because you see what I'm doing right here. You see these lines. You see this up here. Like this is a straight line that doesn't. It's not perpendicular. It's not parallel to like your frame. So it's kind of giving you a weird. It's even if this looks okay, it's making it look crooked because the line is crooked. Even if you're not crooked. So lines that are going to kind of like create the illusion of unevenness, you either want to crop them out or if you can, maybe rotate it like that. Because look, you see, if we line it up with this line is crooked, right? It makes this uneven. But we line it up with this one. So this crookedness literally changed the whole perspective of how we looked at this image. So all we do is if we just bring this in, right? I like this little, the negative space up there, so we don't want to kill it too much. But we'll probably bring it up here to like this line on these windows, and we crop that in, right? Let's see how that looks. Just a bit more balanced, in my opinion, right? We didn't capture it all the way. We left a little bit, but like if we just took a bit more time, rotated it, get it in there, and get it just to get a lot more harmony within the shot. And if we used our grid lines, we could probably line up this little beam with the grid to really lock in on like that balance. But unless you make a creative decision to shoot it at a weird angle, I would definitely try to go for some symmetrical, or at the very least some type of 90-degree balance when it comes to my vertical lines, right? For this type of shot, not like as a rule of thumb. But great work, love the color, great exposure as well. Like a really, really, really well exposed image. Got this one, cool as just as well. Great use of lines, great depth within the work. Definitely could have gone without this whole area because there's really not that much going on. So if you'd have just literally we're using like a wide lens or a telephoto, something that zoomed.
So this one was actually on my phone. And
Okay.
my goal was to crop this
Yeah,
in post, but I felt like it took too much from the image, like the quality wise.
I
So
hear
I
you.
didn't do.
I hear you. But even just like right here, right? Like right here, you crop in right here, boom. Like it just feels it's a lot more focused on the subject matter. Even this is cool. Like I'm not mad at this either. It's an interesting look, but I just feel like this down here is just like there's a lot playing against you in terms of like the focus because your eyes are like I'm looking for a reason why this is in the shot. And I'm not finding it. And so it kind of keeps people wandering aimlessly in terms of your attention span. Um, what could be cool in post production, right, would be to because you have like a lot of really bright highlights here, and this is like a shadowy area. So if you bring down your exposure really, really low in post production and editing, you can create a really cool effect where this becomes now a really dark negative space, and this is kind of like emphasized by some of the only bright images on the screen, even silhouetted behind the brightness of the sky. So cool things, right? You can either crop out stuff that distracts, or you can minimize it through some cool editing means, right? When we get started with our editing workshop, we'll be able to mess around with stuff like that and talk more deeply. But great work, great work. Um, yeah, cool shot here. Just honestly, no notes. Really, really good shot. You shot this with your phone as well?
Yeah, that's what with my phone as well. I feel like it's too much going on sometimes. I like a little bit, like especially the cars and the trees. I was really focusing on the church and the way the light was hitting both those buildings.
But that's the life. That's the life of the city. The cars and the trees and this dude on the scooter, my man sitting right here, people walking by. That is those little bits of things that makes it feel natural, right? It's like if one thing that makes hotel rooms feel uncanny is the fact that there's no element of humans living there. And so you want things to kind of feel lived in for you to feel comfortable there. And the same way with our photos. If you're shooting people, you're shooting scenes, you're shooting nature, there needs to be an element of like things are happening here. And even though it's not the focus, they cater to it's just like the little garnishment. It's how you dress the plate. But you can't control some of the lighting and the color stuff when it comes to your phone. For a phone photo, great capture, great moment, great moment. um
Thanks.
Wade, talk to me about what you want to talk to me about your question with this image. You there, brother?
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna back out to be
No
able to
problem.
use the mic. Anyways, so basically, as I stated in the thing, it's a accidental compression shot. So those cars are a lot closer
Yes.
than they actually were in real life. And so I was wondering why, and I use the same point and shoot that I used at the Coca-Cola, and I was wondering why this one came out more successful in as a compression shot versus when I was trying to do the Coca-Cola one. Was it completely just angle that I was at, or what was it? Because the Coca-Cola one just did not turn out right for me at all.
Yes. So let me pull up. I'm not gonna pull it up for the class. I'm just gonna look at it now. Yes.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, right? and it is the angle. It is the angle because the billboard. Can I pull up the photo? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, go on.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Just to give a visual element for everyone to see as well what I'm talking about. Um, so for the compression shot, and for some of my folks in the beginner class, you may not necessarily know what we're talking about, but essentially compression refers to how your background looks in relation to your foreground and how you can change that by shooting further away and zooming in, right? That's just kind of like the brief understanding of it. But so say we put this over to the side, right? Bam. Now, for this image, right? And this is why it wasn't your fault. And it's not necessarily, it was a little bit more difficult. Is because in terms of like your sight line, right? This you were trying to use the compression rule when it came to this billboard and the background. They are on a completely different sight line. So here you can see that there's a closer relation, but as you get further away from these two items, your sight line shifts because they also get further away from each other. You get what I'm saying? So it's going to be difficult to get that compression because the angle at which you can only go so far and so low. Because as the further you get away from this to maintain that look of compression, you also have to get lower. And you can't go diagonal unless you're going through the bedrock. Um and the reason why the compression on this shot is so successful is because the cars and the bike rider they're on that same plane. So you essentially, because I mean, look at this. You see this spot, this street light all the way down here in the distance? Because they're closer on the eye level, you're way, way far, but they're still on that same eye level when you're further back and compressing. So, you have to can factor in not only the distance between you and the subject matter, but the subject matter, and then also whether or not they're on the same sight line. Um, you
Got it. So the image that you showed in class with the gentleman on the road with the mountains in the background, because the gentleman was kind of up on the hill as the road was kind of going down, he was on the same uh, sight line as the mountains in the background, and that's why that shot was so successful.
essentially, yep, yep. And
Yep.
I'll pull it up to show you because even though they're really really far in the original shot, you see he's still on that sight line. They're still right. He's right in front of it. Now, if he was trying to create the compression look with like the sun or something up here in the sky, you would have to then shoot from at a lower angle because the thing is the relationship between the subject matter and the thing you're wishing to uh, compress and expand, they have to be they have to be like this. You get what I'm saying? And so if yep, they have to be like this. So if my subject matter is up here, I have to go then down here. Like I have to keep that relationship has to change. Has to change. But so yeah, that's exactly why you were a lot more successful with this one than the other one. But the effort, and I see the effort, and it was fire. It was fire. And what's more important that you understand the principle. And you get it, like you see how that clicks. It's like this one's more successful. This one's not as successful. And so now you're bridging the gap between the intent and then what you did differently. And so now next time you do it, you're cooking. You're clocked it. You feel me? You feel me? And this is really really great work here because I really like this shot. And that's the utilization of the tools of compression, right? Because this looks like a still frame from like a movie, right? This looks like a very strong emotional narrative shot. It kind of gives a degree of like isolation almost. It's kind of I'm feeling like a scene where maybe the character went through some type of strong emotional traumatic moment and now they're like riding home and you can really feel the somberness of like this sunset in the city and just like being able to create that relationship between the background and the foreground through a tool like compression. Like that's just a really great angle that you took. I love that you put them on the third line. You have like a cool scene back here. I love the messiness of like the scene and like the hustle and bustle. Like great shot, great shot. And then also what's really cool, what I really like about this shot is really leans into the less is more because I know that they're on a bike, but do we see the bike? We don't. And because of what you chose to implement, how it's there, like it expresses so much detail and story about the image without wasting space, right? It's like you got the helmet, you got this little bag, I don't even know what it is, but it's giving mail courier type shit, right? They're in the street, and there's only one reason why a person will be in the street on a helmet, in front of cars, and because they're on a bike. It's like just like that, because you know that, and because of you subconsciously were able to incorporate, whether subconsciously or actually consciously, you were able to incorporate these details, and you knew that you didn't need to show the entire bicycle to illustrate the fact that someone's on a bike. And like those are going to be those decisions that separate, some very, cool work from like this is deep, impactful, and this is bike dorks work. Like that's the difference between like a picture of somebody on a bike and this is a bike dork joint. You know what I mean? So great work. Great work.
I appreciate the feedback. Thanks.
Of course, of course. All right, who we got here? This is whose is this? I forgot who downloaded. Whose work is this here? Speak now. Will forever hold your peace.
It's mine.
Heck yeah, nice. And you know what? And I peep because like look at this. Look at the color. Look at the detail. I love that you're not afraid. You're not afraid to expose. You're not afraid of a little bit of darkness. You're not afraid of a like real exposure, right? And I love that about you, even the work that you used at the showcase. Like I was really a big fan of like the deep shadows and like the relationship between the lights and the darks, and I like this quite a bit, right? Like I love that you put them right here on this third line. um and you were very close to also putting this horizon right here. Like you didn't, it's not too much back, it's not too much, I mean, not too much foreground, not too much background. It's like a really cool balance, like very bisecting. And I think a lot of the negative space that is here, it really kind of leans into like the isolation of it. um Great work, honestly. I don't really have too many notes, and this is going to be, and I hate to sound like a broken record, and especially for my beginner class, you're going to hear me say this all the time because you can't stress it enough. But get that crop on, get your crop on, right? I like
I was
this.
about to ask, like, what would you
I like,
crop?
it's like I like this.
Because they're unedited.
And it's cool, and I like this, right? But here's maybe my problem with it is that, and this is going to be the problem with a lot of certain types of elements within certain work, right? It's like if you're gonna put it in there, put it in. If you're not, get it out, because there's not enough of this for me to justify it being here and also adding value to the work. So I would probably bring this in, and then also honestly for everything, I'll probably cut your background and your foreground by like maybe a couple small percent, right? And the grid, that's why the grid lines are so cool, because what you can do is, let's see if we can fit our subject matter right here. These dudes, put them right here in this line, right? Put them right in here, and then if we can just maybe rotate a little bit so that we get our horizon line kind of leveled with a grid line as well, just to keep that good balance. And then we crop that in. And honestly, let me give him a little more sky, because I think this yellow line, because we're not incorporating as much of it, it can be a bit distracting. So let's just bring that up. Get rid of the yellow line, right? Not a fan of this little corner piece, but it's not a make or break. Um, and I think the sky is cool enough. There's cool enough details to where we can leave that having more, right? And when it comes to horizons and you're shooting sunsets or landscapes, you either want to put, you either have a really really cool detailed sky and you want to put your horizon line on this bottom third, right? If the sky is busting, put your horizon line on the bottom third. If the ground is busting, then put your horizon line on that top third, right? And it definitely changes the perspective and the focus of emphasis, right? So for this one, we'll probably come up here, and I'm going to put on that bottom third because we don't necessarily need uh, this sewer thing either, right? The sky isn't particularly, it's not particularly like crazy going on, but there's some cool stuff going on with the clouds. Not mad at it. It's good enough. We save that as a copy, and we look at this image, and it definitely it gives a bit more intimacy, isolation, and it really leans into the space that they're in as well as the relationship. Really, it shows a really strong relationship between these two guys and each other, And when you have a wide shot of a specific subject matter in a large environment, it shows a lot how the environment affects them. So that's one of the perspective implementations that we can utilize when it comes to how wide or how tight we shoot a subject matter. Because now it feels a lot more like fucking isolated, solo. It's almost kind of sad, to an extent when you look
Yeah.
at the decision that you made with the exposure. And I like that you kept it low because you maintain the vividness of these colors. Um, like I mean, you're really solid with your exposure. Just a high quality shot through and through, and I just really like what you did here. I think, and I can't tell, maybe it could be some compression as a result of the quality dip when I download it, but it does seem a little bit like the background, like it seems like this building and like this area is a little bit more in focus than these dudes. And if I had to choose what would be more in focus, it would be these dudes. I would definitely, if I'm not sure what gear you had set up or what, you might have taken this from a car while you were driving. If you did, that's fire. But
I did.
um, you said you did.
Yeah.
I was about to say, listen, but you be snapping though, because the last shot was a car while you were driving. Key might need to you might need to put together a series of call it in transit, and it's just
Car
you.
shoots.
You get what I'm saying? Drive by shooting, and that's some shit like that. Drive by shooter, but it's tough for you have driven by in a car and got this shot 10 times better. Great shot, great work. I'm not even gonna finish what I was gonna say about focus because you were fucking in a car moving. Great shot, great work. Love this. You understand what I'm saying about the crop and just like what to exclude?
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool beans. Great work, great work. Um, is this your work as well?
Yeah.
Nice. I like this. Was at the High Museum. No, this not the High.
No, it was at the Noma.
They have some porcelain like little figurines just like this at the High. This is so dope. I like this a lot. I like this a lot. I like the perspective you had in a nice rule of third. You have a great depth of field. I love the color. I love the deep moodiness of it. I think that's something that's really prevalent in your work, and that's something I think you do very well. The time I would have took a little bit more time with composition because I think the flare in this lighting does play against the mood you're trying to convey. It's very distracting, and it's just the lighting is very. It's a really distracting thing. Um,
Mhm.
and then just I would just taking a bit more time with focus, right? I would love to see the sharpness and the detail of these porcelain things because you're putting such a strong effort into making sure we look at this. If you're gonna do that, make sure that it's in a high enough, visibility so that we can really take in the thing that you want us to look at. Um, but yeah, but that also could have been a result of low light. Focusing in low light can be really tough. Our cameras can sometimes have a hard time differentiating certain details, and you may be able to compensate with that with a certain setting in your camera. So do some research. There's a thing called beam autofocus assistance where it shoots a little light and it helps you focus on a specific subject matter in low light situations. But you had something you were going to say?
I had to compress this image. I just converted it to like a JPEG because like the original image,
Was
it
raw?
was a little bit more. It had more details in it.
Got you. Well, yeah, that might be what it is as well. But yeah, definitely in terms of the final product, I definitely would have liked to see more sharper details in this particular figurine. But I love where you placed it. I love the composition. Um, yeah, great work. Great work. Let's see here. This one is this yours as well? Fire.
Yeah.
This shit is so tough. I mean, no notes really. Only thing I'm doing is come in here, a little bit of a rotate, tiny crop, right? Because I like these as much as they're cool, but they're also not. It's not as important as like the relationship between this house and this sky. This shit looks like a Studio Ghibli house, bro. This is tough. Probably gonna copy in like that. Done deal. Big fan of this. No notes. Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. Yeah, bro. This is dope. This is yours as well. Oh no, this is Soul. This is Soul. Yeah, nah, this is tough. I like this a lot. It's really cool, really creative, really unique. Did you would you what was the lighting setup here? Was this just like all natural?
So I got this Ottlight, Ottlite,
Got you.
and I can't change, like, I can't control the brightness at all. So what
Mhm.
I did was put a piece of like thin paper. I taped that to it, and then I just lowered my ISO to 200, and then I put my, let me see, put my exposure, my aperture at 25. So my
Nice.
shutter speed was on 20.
Nah, bro, this is fire. This is fire. I like this a lot. This is dope. It's giving Mr. Anderson some Matrix shit. It's like that one scene. Hold on. Let me see. I'm gonna pull it up. Pull it up. Um, hold on 1 second. 1 second. It's just tight. Look at this. What it reminds me of, bro. It reminds me. Remember that scene in the Matrix where fucking Agent Smith was dodging the bullets, bro?
Yeah, Dr. Willis, yeah.
That's exactly what this looks like. That's kind of tough. It's giving that effect. I like this, man. Honestly, and I put up Lightroom because I wanna show you something. Right? Did you edit this at all?
No, I did not.
Okay, so just a quick thing. I'm not gonna take too much time. But just a quick thing just to consider, especially when you're using that effect, right? Because I use that effect quite a lot, right? You know that about me. I love the lighting effects. I love slow shutters, and I love this ethereal kind of ghastly look. When I'm doing that, when in my post processing, I always want to make sure I accentuate those details because you know it creates a degree of fuzziness and softness when you use this type of style, right? So if we come in, right, a little bit of sharpness, a little bit of luminance because we don't want to be crazy crunchy. But what I do is I come in with my texture, and you see already, right? You see how the texture is bringing out those details in your face. And I'm just kind of going back and forth so you can see what I'm doing. So I bring out my texture, not too much, because what the rest will do with lighting and clarity. So I'll come in with my clarity now, right? And boom, clarity kind of helps bring out some of that as well. Not too much because it's going to make it look crazy. Just a little bit to help bring out those details. And you can also use dehaze, right? Dehaze kind of brings down, the brights and kind of makes it less and more smoky. So here I'll probably bring that down just a little bit. And then just already, right? Difference between before and after. So we can see a little bit more of those details, right? Now, as a result, those details come out in the background as well. You can use your masks and different tools within Lightroom to isolate specific effects that you do. We're not going to talk about that now, though. And then I'll probably come in, bring down some of my highlights, bring down some of my whites, right? And I bring up my shadows a little bit, bring down my blacks, because I really want to separate the darks from that. Bring down my highlights a little bit, my whites, bring this exposure back up, bring in my contrast, and I'm gonna bring my exposure back down a little bit. Shadows up, blacks down, and I'll probably come back here to my curves like that. Put a spot here because I want to bring some smokiness to it a little bit. And you see what I'm doing right here in the blacks? I'm literally using my smokiness to
Yes.
kind of like flatten those out to give it more of like a matte instead of just like a deep black. So I'm just gonna come up just a little bit right there. Boom. Helps blend the shadows between the blacks and that, you know? And then just to help really keep the focus, don't really see much with the shoes, but the bottom of the chair is cool. So I'm gonna crop this in, take off my aspect lock, and I'm gonna put your eyes. You see, I'm putting your eye right here on the third line, right? Putting your eyes right in the third line to an extent. Little slight rotate, bring this down. Boom. You get what I'm saying? Just a little bit more focused, a little bit more stronger. The colors aren't, I'm not gonna take time to get into colors because I really don't, I will probably adjust the colors more. It's a little greener than I want it, you know. But the green is cool, especially if we're going with the Matrix theme. Blue is cool, right? Whatever. But you get the process, right? When you're doing a shot like this, you definitely unless you intentionally want it to look softer, make sure you're allocating some time to go into post and bringing out those details, bring out the sharpness, bringing back the definition of the subject matter that you do lose when you use this particular style, right? And then just to really drive it home, you might want to throw a little bit of extra grain on that guy just to make it look real funky. Bring the size down, bring up the roughness. Boom. and then now you got some really interesting shit. And then also I got a couple presets. Black and white also benefits this style really well. It makes it look really unique, really really cool. Um, yeah, black and white just all when you use this type of style, using a black and white post process always kind of gives it like a really interesting. Like look at this shit, right? You know what I'm saying? Like I just do a crazy preset on it. Didn't really touch it that much. And then with something like this, if we just crop that in now, right? Boom, bam, just in time for spooky season. This shit look like Slender Man. Like I'm here for this, you know. So just an example, because you took an approach, because you shot something very very um artistic. I don't have a there's no critiques for that. There's no things that I was like, oh, you should have did this, you should have did that. You did something artistically driven. That's your vision. That's your, your brainchild. So all I can speak to is like, okay, so I'm familiar with this style, something that I shoot quite often. This is what I do when I have something like this on my plate. This is how I arrange it. Just a suggestion, not a way that you should be. You sent me another one, right? Where's the other ones? I think I
Yeah,
don't know.
there's another one.
I don't know if I downloaded it. Let me
Can
grab it
I
right
ask
now.
me about that one you're working on right now?
So,
So,
Is how many exposures is that to create that?
uh, just one. Yeah, because I was at 20 seconds for my shutter speed.
okay.
Oh, so
But I
you
just have to
moved
go.
you moved your body in different positions within that 20 seconds?
Mm-hmm.
Fire.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So that's one way you can do it. That's definitely one way you can do it. You can go the route where you use multiple exposures, and I prefer to use one exposure and then do several things on that thing. And if you know you have it for several seconds, right? However long you are able to be stagnant within that scene is what's going to create a longer imprint. So just like he did in this shot, he went here, stayed there for a little bit, then he went here, stayed there for a little bit, and then that's what's going to help continue to imprint him on that frame, right?
And
Same
this was
thing.
30. This one.
Yeah,
This photo.
fire. Same thing here. Really, really great work. Really, really great work. Um, yeah, I have no critiques for this. The only thing I would have done differently, I would have probably used a stool instead of a chair because I would not want to have had this square that's reflecting that light. That's the only difference that's the only thing I would do differently. Or if you didn't have a
Looking back at
stool,
these shots.
you say what?
I was looking back at these shots I did, and I was like, okay, the chair was like the first mine to do it because I had a stool off to the side I was using
Yeah.
behind my camera, and I looked at it. I was like, okay, that's just taking a lot. Like that's taking a lot away from the photo.
Yeah, yeah. And then you also, because you got this line cutting through your eyes, you either can use a chair or like maybe a blanket that would reflect the light. I mean, that would absorb the light instead of reflect it, because that leather is definitely reflecting it, and that's kind of it's giving an off look. Do this shit again. You go run it back. This is fire.
I did with a few just for like my shots I was trying to get.
Yeah.
After I did like a few shots I like had on my list, I just did this just for fun to play with the shutter. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna go back to this.
Yeah, because you got heat. This for whatever this is, this is heat. This is heat, and I see your mind. You're cooking. I love, and even though I know you're using like an older camera, I don't know what you shot on this, but like the texture, man, like all these like little the grain, like all these little artifacts around like it's just
That's
it plays, it works.
that's the lint on the blanket.
On the blanket, there was a blanket on the lens.
So no. So that behind me, so like that backdrop, that's a cover out of the closet, and then like that little white spot right there,
Yeah,
that's lint.
shout out set design credit. That's hard.
I just shot this in my room.
Yeah, this is great work, bro. This is really great work. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, man. I honestly that's the key is like you get your minds working, you get out there, you get shooting. And I promise you, for those who are new to the class, who are new to the cohort, and new to the community in general, right? You're seeing this work now, right? And these are great photographers. You all are great photographers. But what's going to really benefit you in the long term is consistently shooting, testing yourself, getting out of your comfort zone, and just putting in that time, putting in that effort. A lot of these folks, these are some of the people who submit for the feedback every session. Some people are submitting for the first time, and I promise you not. I have seen. I'm sure they see it within themselves, but like there are improvements every time you shoot something, especially if you have an opportunity to talk about it amongst other photographers who can not only give you the validation that your ideas are worthy, but also can give you, some extra insight and just really compliment parts of your work that you may have overlooked. Um, yeah, man, great stuff. I'm super excited. I'm thrilled, and I'm grateful that you all have been so enthusiastic and participant in what we've been doing here and in the classes in person. Um, I'm going to put together a poll to see who's willing, able, and down to do the photo walk because I really want to do that. I really want to do that long exposure, like light writing photo walk workshop with everybody. I think it'd be a great thing. It was extremely useful for my formative years of photography, especially when learning shutter speed. That was extremely valuable. And it'll be a great time for us to kind of talk about photo note taking and what type of notes you should take when you're out shooting and how to retain that information going forward. Plus, it'd be cool. We can go hang out. We'll eat a pizza or something. Um, any other questions, concerns, ideas, input for me for the session?
I submitted a photo. I just want some feedback on the right quick.
Okay, got it, got it. We'll knock that out right now because we have very few time. Because I do have to. I gotta skate in a sec. Let me download this. Let me download this, and this will be the last one for the night. This will be the last one for the night. Where are my downloads? All right, bet. All right, cool beans. Cool beans. I like this shot. I like this shot a lot. Very moody. Love the color. Was this color added in post, or was this how it looked in the scene?
So I was at a party, and then I remember how you said like at high bias, don't look for don't try to add flash if you don't have to look for the light.
Yes, sir.
So he was at the DJ booth. It had fluorescent color light, so I just bumped up my ISO as high as it could,
Hell
took
yeah.
a picture, and then when I edited, it was it was the grain because of the high ISO. So I added the denoise. I didn't want it to be looking so AI, so I lowered the ISO as much as possible to keep some of the details without, mask out and smooth out the whole picture, if that
Yes,
makes
sir.
any sense.
Yes, sir. Tell me first, how do you feel about this image?
I feel like I like it because it's moody and everything, right? I feel like I don't know if I should have had bumped up the blacks. I mean, lower the blacks a little bit so I could get more details of the background. But if I did that, then it would have had so more grain and noise in the picture.
Got you. Got you. And that's one of the things you're sometimes up against, right? It's like you have low light situations where you have to make a decision. It's like something's getting sacrificed. It's either going to be some of the quality of the image or it's going to be, some of the detail that's visible. And I think you made a great decision. Next time, if you want, feel free to upload the raw images and we can talk a little bit through the editing process. But in terms of like the success of this image and like the feeling of it, I'm a big fan of it. It seems intimate. It seems deep, especially if you're talking about an artist in the booth. Like this is like one of those really deep, intimate moments, and I think you captured it well. Um, the only thing I would say, like this bottom area, it's very, very distracting because it's super bright, and I'm not necessarily sure if it complements the story. So I just would literally, I would lock my aspect ratio for sure. Because I wouldn't want to like remove the ratio per se, but I'll bring this in right here, and not too much because when you're shooting on a lower ISO, I mean a higher ISO, that grain does translate over, especially when you're like cropping in. You'll see it a lot more. So just like a slight crop, I would probably this is a good shot. A much to me, it's a much more focused, dramatic, and successful image in terms of what you were trying to convey in this particular shoot. Were you editing in Lightroom?
Yes.
So you're editing in Lightroom. You got your spot removal tool. Get your spot removal. Get rid of this guy. Get rid of this little line. Get rid of this thing right here, And I will probably get rid of this up here as well, because
Okay.
all those little things that just distract. And in Lightroom, pretty easy. It's a one click. You click over that, get rid of it. Click over that, gets rid of it. And now you have a very focused, direct, and just like clear image, no distractions. But outside of that, in terms of like the mood, the timing, the decision, the executive decision you made to bump up that ISO to make sure you got that shot, I think it was a great decision, man. Great decision. And great shot. Great work just in general. Honestly. Heck,
Thank you.
heck yeah, man. That's what I'm saying, bro. Like y'all are cooking, y'all are amazing. I'm not saying that it's not just gas. Like I've seen y'all. Some of you have been in the first cohort, and even some of you have only been involved for a couple of days. You're crushing it already. I'm ecstatic, and I'm really excited for Sunday. I got surprised, especially for my beginner class, because you guys haven't seen this yet. Um, but yeah, we got some cool stuff for this Sunday coming up, and then also the next Sunday as well. We got cool shit happening all the time. You know what I mean? Thank you all. If we have any other questions or concerns, we are finished with the feedback session, but don't forget to message me if you are interested in the breakout session for another more in-depth recap for my beginner class. Just kind of get you caught up if you need that. If you don't, disregard. But yeah, man, I think this was really dope. I'm glad you guys made it out. I apologize for the time adjustment, and I hate that I have to rush off. Um, but I will see you Sunday, if not this Sunday, the one after, and then also we'll be back here a Thursday again for the next virtual session. As again, man, I'm always extremely grateful, and I hate to say it over and over and over and over, but I'm super grateful for you all, man, taking a chance with the stuff that I do and having any type of value and support. So y'all rest easy, stay safe. I'm gonna catch you on the flippity flop. All right, peace.